Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hello everyone, Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and the Savvy Dentist podcast. It's great to have your company for another episode of the show. Now, literally hot off the press, I have some news for you. And for the last little while here at Savvy Dentist, we have been working on a project. And this project has been sitting in the back of my mind, probably the recesses of my mind, for at least 6 or 7 years, when we started the podcast actually. And that is the Savvy Dentist magazine. And I'm super excited to let you know we have just launched it. The first edition is out now. The Savvy Dentist magazine is dedicated exclusively to the business of dentistry, how you run your practice. It's a totally free magazine. Whether you're having it in print format or digital format, it's totally free. And we have columnists from all the different kind of advisory groups, whether it's around accounting and wealth creation, legal professions, your property and your fit out sort of material, things like HR and recruitment, of course, marketing, and everything in between, IT, etc., all that sort of stuff. And in the magazine, we also interview people from outside of the profession so we can look at their experiences, look at their lessons, and apply those to the profession of dentistry, to the business of dentistry. And this magazine, as I said, is dedicated exclusively to that, to the business of dentistry. So there's no clinical articles, there's nothing about any of that sort of stuff. It is just around the business of dentistry. And I've always felt that as practice owners, we need to transcend the traditional practice management model. It's about moving forward more confidently with a business mindset. In times gone by, that was less necessary, but as our operating environment continues to change, I really believe that dentists need to be abreast of the best business thinking, the best knowledge that they can have at their fingertips is going to be really invaluable as they go through their commercial journeys. And that's entirely the premise of this magazine, and we're excited to bring it to you. So the first edition is out now. Now, the first edition is in digital format only. We released it to our client group a week or so ago, and we did a print run there. But at the moment, beyond that, this first edition is digital only. But once we get to edition 2, which is a quarterly edition, so it'll be coming out in spring. So the winter edition is out now. The spring edition will be in both print and digital versions. So it's entirely free. There's nothing to pay, whether you want the print version or the digital version, it's entirely free. And we hope that that's a really valuable resource you'll be able to come back to again and again. Now, in terms of valuable resources, I want to introduce you to Tony Bradshaw today. And Tony is an expert when it comes to personal finance and coaching around that, helping people become millionaires, basically. His story is really one that's compelling and interesting and fascinating. He talks a lot about the mindset of becoming a millionaire, being clear about your vision, the steps on how to do it, but also I think what's interesting is the purpose of it as well. And it's a really interesting and fascinating conversation. Tony is a really generous guy, and he shared so many good things on the podcast that I know are going to be helpful for you in your own journey to create wealth. And without any further ado, here's Tony Bradshaw. I hope you enjoy this as much as I enjoyed recording it for you. Tony Bradshaw, welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast, coming to us all the way from Nashville. How's things over there, my friend?
I'm doing well, Jesse, doing well. Glad to talk to you tonight.
Tony, you're very well known as a personal finance coach. You've been working in the personal finance field for a lot of years, but I know that hasn't been your entire professional background. I'm curious to ask, how does one find their way into the finance world when you didn't start out that way? What's the backstory there?
Yeah, I actually started out as an engineer. I went to school for engineering, loved it, loved making things. I'm a problem solver. Engineers are problem solvers and math guys. So that's what I did. And then, got my first job out of college. And, I had my financial awakening. You and I were talking earlier, but I didn't mention this. But at 25, I got my first W-2 out of college and I made $39,000. Of course, that's USD. Yep. And I was pretty shocked because I knew I didn't have much money in the bank. And I was living at home with my parents in a studio bedroom apartment. So because I had that much money, but I was somehow $16,000 in debt, I knew there was a problem. And I looked around and just said, you know what? I've got a computer that I financed. I've got a kick-ass stereo system, TV, electronics, because I always very futuristic, right, Jesse? So I'm like, I'm going to get married one day, and I think my wife is going to bring the furniture and I'm going to bring the electronics, and that's going to be a perfect balance. And that's exactly what happened. My wife brought the bed, she brought the couch, the sofa, and I brought all the electronics. So it all worked out. And but that was my life. I had a car note, $315 a month, which is nothing today, but back then it was a lot of money. And I knew something was wrong, so I started realizing I've got to change. What I did last year when I was 25, I can't do ever again. So I started studying money, learning about money, reading books, reading all that kind of stuff, and then very quickly decided, you know what? I think I can be a millionaire one day. And I think I can do it by the time I'm 15 because I laid out a plan. I'm a planner. I said, this is what I learned. This is what I need to do. This is what I'm going to execute. And I put a spreadsheet together. Love spreadsheets. Engineers, they go hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
And I figured out it'd take me about 15 years with my financial plan to become, I call them millionaire plans. I don't like financial plans. I like millionaire plans. And was able to hit that number. And then along that journey, things changed. So I left the engineering field right around 30, went into not to business, but went to work for a gentleman named Dave Ramsey. He's a big personal finance guy here in Nashville, Tennessee. But I went to work for him, made the shift from engineering into the digital age, into technology. I loved doing computer stuff. I love computers. I loved databases. I loved the internet and what you could do with data when you could share information with other people that you never even met. That was just so impressive to me. So it mesmerized me, and I made a career shift, and then had a good 15-year run with Dave Ramsey. Left there in 2016, took a break, hung out with my kids, bought some property, and just relaxed a little bit. And then at the end of that year that I had left, we had it was a traumatic time for us, Jesse. We had not only did I lose my job that year, I did get, as I tell people, I got voted off the island. We lost my mother-in-law to cancer in July. Turned around, found out my mom had cancer in August, and she passed away in November. So we lost my job, my mother-in-law, and my mom all in the same year. It was a very tough time for us as a family and with my wife. And then at the end of that year, I got a call from another guy that was in personal finance out in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I went out there and spent about 5 months. And you talk about turmoil. I lost my job with Dave Ramsey in May of 2016, took this new job. 2 months after I got there, I found out the SEC had the guy under investigation.
Ooh.
And the owner, yeah. And I decided to stick it out, and that lasted till about May 31st. And so May 31st, I was, that job ended too, not through any fault of my own, just they ran out of money and probably rightly so. But what happened was working for him in those 5 months is when I realized that I had my own vision for personal finance and what needed to be done in people's lives. And that was the beginning of that. So that gave birth to the Millionaire Choice book, Millionaire Not You Can Choose, because I do believe, just like my story, I decided I didn't want to live a broke lifestyle like my parents. I wanted to live a different lifestyle. So I made a choice to become a millionaire. And then I share that with people. And then that became my podcast, which came out in 2020, which is also the Millionaire Choice, but it's called Make the Choice, Create Your Plan. So because I believe that's what I did when I was 25, I made my choice to become a millionaire, and I put a plan behind it, and then I executed that plan. And that's what I teach people today.
I should tell you, I remember very vividly the day I made my choice. I was 6 or 7 years old, and I remember one night I woke up and I could hear my mother crying, and she was sitting outside the bedroom. My bedroom was very close to the bathroom. And I walked outside of my bedroom to see what was going on, and my mother was sitting on the toilet, chain smoking. And I remember it was the 1970s, and they had this big chunky blue glass ashtray. And I remember asking her what the problem was, and she, said to me, we're going to lose the house, basically. Now, as a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old, I think it's 6 or 7, you don't know what that means in practical terms, but all it does is it takes away your certainty, it takes away your, your peace. And so for a lot of years after that, I was very anxious about money. For about 12, 18 months, I'd go to bed at night kind of crying, not wanting to bother my mum and dad because they had enough of their own problems to deal with. But I remember very, very clearly, coming back to your point about the choice, and I think this is really key, I remember at that young age thinking, I will never, ever be in a position like that. I will never put myself or my family into a position where I need to feel vulnerable. Now, that's had some really positive effects. It's had a couple of interesting effects as well. But the choice part is really interesting. So I wanted to ask you about, you said make your choice, create the plan. So I want to ask you about choice, because one of the people I've been mentored by over the years says to me, Jesse, it's just a decision, but not all decisions carry that gravitas or that weight. I wanted to ask you, what does a real choice mean? What does a decision mean when you choose or decide to become a millionaire?
What I've learned from the coaching I've done and from my 15 years, with the Dave Ramsey organization, is there's a couple of catalysts that cause people to make this choice. And usually, pain is a big motivator, right? So if you're like your mother, she went through that was pain for you. So that caused you to make a shift. So you make your choices or your decisions. Sometimes they're motivated by pain. Other times, I think, which is a little bit more rare, is motivated by opportunity or maybe vision. Maybe you see something that somebody else doesn't see. But the majority of people won't make change or won't make choices different than their status quo or their lifestyle until they face enough pain to where they're like, something's got to give. Now, sometimes in those moments, they make very poor choices, right? They make very bad choices, detrimental choices. But if for the ones that decide to make a difference and go, I believe I can do better, or I can believe there's something better for me, that's what I typically find people to do. So the choice, it's more than just a choice. It becomes, you have to back it up with action. Now, inside of that, here's something I've learned along the way, that most people, I'm a visionary, okay? I'm a very visionary guy. It's very easy for me to see the future in a different way.
Yeah.
Most people and most of my friends and most, if not all of the people I grew up with, they're just doing the same stuff over and over and over. Whatever was modeled for them by their parents, whatever's around them and by their friends or the people they hang out with, that's the rut or the thinking or the direction that they fall into. But for those that decide to make those changes in those moments where they maybe have too much pain, they start to develop a vision that's different than maybe what they grew up with. And that's the key moment, because for me, I developed a vision, said, hey, I believe I can be a millionaire. That's my vision, right? I can be a millionaire by the time I'm 40. And I thought I was really special, Jesse, until I met all these young guys and girls who've done it by the time they're like 25 and 30 years old. Yeah. And so I realized I'm not that special. I'm just another guy, and I'm kind of average, right? There's nothing really that special about me other than I made this choice. Now, for some people, like, in the Dave Ramsey era that I grew up in, is Dave is helping people with their vision, and he's giving them a vision of becoming debt free. Mm-hmm. So they can't see if you're hurting with money and you're not managing money, you can't pay your bills like your mom was. She can't possibly imagine being a millionaire. It's too far. The jump is too big, right? But she could possibly latch onto a vision like, oh, I want a house. That's a vision. Or, oh, I don't want to live in this financial pain anymore. What can I do differently? That's a vision, right? So you're developing a vision. It's not as grand as becoming a millionaire, but it is a step along that path. And so for me, when I made my choice, I came up with, basically a three-pronged change that I shifted, three changes I implemented. And it was very simple. Instead of spending my $3,000 a month and spending money on credit cards, I said, no, we're going to reverse that flow. We're going to get my money flowing in a better direction, because right now all my money is flowing away from me. So let's just reverse the flow. So what I did is I said, you know what? Instead of living and spending $4,000 a month, I'm going to live on $1,000 a month. And that's what I'm going to live on. And then I'm going to take $1,000 and pay off debt, which at that point I had a little bit of credit card debt, about $2,000 or $3,000, and about $13,000 on a car note. And I'm going to put $1,000 a month towards that. So it took me about 16 months to pay that off, because I was very aggressively paying on. And then I took about $1,000 and made investments. And my investment strategy back then was pretty simple. It was about $500 a month into mutual funds and $500 a month into stock investments. And I was doing more like tech stock investments. That was all my plan was at that point. Now, today I'm much smarter because I've got another 25 years of learning that I've done. But that is all it took for me to get started and get going in the right direction and to become a millionaire. And at 25-year-old, right? So a lot of times we discount youth, older people discount youth. But the reality is, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out how to build some wealth. You just have to, follow the principles, implement the strategies, have some self-discipline. And, there's a couple set things that you have to do, and it kind of naturally occurs. You don't have to be greedy. That's another thing people think. You got to be like chasing money or be greedy. You don't. It's just a set process, a set behavior patterns, and then this wealth will, naturally occur.
It's really interesting, when you spoke about reversing the flow of money, it sounds like when you said, I'm going to live off $1,000 a month, I'm going to invest $1,000 a month, I'm going to pay down my debt aggressively with the third $1,000 a month. What's really interesting is you've set that strategy, you've set that, it's almost like a game to yourself, right? How can I live on $1,000 a month, right? How do I become clever about this? How can I make that work? And I remember really interestingly, this is going back, I'm dating myself. I think it was 1996. But in 1996, I remember in my wallet, I had, when you open up your wallet and you've got a photo of your driver's license, I remember I took my driver's license out of there and I put it somewhere else. But in the place of that, I put my savings target in there. So every time I opened up my wallet, I'd play a game with myself and going, do I really need this? Or do I think I just close my wallet and think about it for a little while longer? And if I really want it, I'll come back and get it. But maybe after a while, the impetus for that will pass and I realise I don't want it. And I think for me, making a game of that and seeing how you can do that is really important. And I'm curious, what were the sort of things you did to live on $1,000 a month? Because you've basically living on a third of your income at the time. And yes, the numbers change these days. You'd be earning more than $39,000 and all that sort of stuff. But it's still an interesting thought process. So I'm curious, how did you play that game with yourself?
Yeah, I think for me, I just quit spending everything. I mean, it was like, don't go buy electronics. I didn't need a new stereo every month. I didn't need a new set of, $1,000 speakers. I just stopped chasing stuff. And I'm just like, I don't need that. I don't need it. I filled my time up with other things that I didn't need to spend money on, because that's part of it is, idle hands kind of go find things to do. Right. So I filled my time up with, activities like soccer. I worked on cars. I played games. Unfortunately, I started playing Video Game Habit in my 20s, but it kept me from going out and spending a bunch of money because my time was getting sucked up with other things. And I learned a lot. Like I read a lot of magazines, a lot of computer books and stuff. So I learned a lot. And, that's a key element in your behavior pattern. What you're talking about is changing behavior patterns, Jesse. And one of those for me was you got to change a behavior pattern. You got to become a lifelong learner. And you either have to learn a skill that actually, pays dividends for you long term, or you learn financial investment strategies. And you have to learn this stuff consistently over time. I don't know what the educational system is like down in Australia, but here, it's K through 12. So you get 13 years of education. And they only implemented financial literacy just a few years ago, not too long ago, but you only get like one semester.
Oh, wow.
So you get financial literacy. So when you look at that and you go, I'm getting 13 years of education, I'm getting half a year of financial literacy, but I'm getting 13 years of math, English, and science, right? So you have to go like, okay, what's more important in the scope of things? Like my daughter, she'll never do more than like 6th or 7th grade math after she graduates. So why is she taking algebra? Why is she taking trig? That's nothing useful for her. She's not even good at it, right? So you're forcing a child to learn something that's utterly useless for them in the scope of their lifetime, when they should be using those years to use like studying money. Like you should literally get an entrepreneur and financial class from K through 12. That's part. So since we miss that as young people, when you are an adult and you go, I want to be a millionaire, I want to build some wealth, I don't want to be broke the rest of my life. I don't want my children to be broke, right? So I got 6 kids. I'm like, we talk about money in this house, right? And I'm like, hey, you guys are all 10 years ahead of me. I didn't start learning about money. I was 25. You guys already understand the principles of no debt. You don't use debt, right? You go make money. They're way ahead of me. It wasn't until I was out of college, before I had $5,000 in the bank. All of my older kids have all had $5,000 in the bank by the time they're 16, 17 years old. Yeah, so that's a different lifestyle. Some do more than that, but those are things. But back to what you were saying about the habits. One I haven't done, which I need to do, but I've heard it taught, is just put $100 in your wallet and don't spend it. And see how long it lasts, because the discipline of going, I don't spend that money that's in my wallet. Now, what I will tell you alongside the habit is like if you spend, we use plastic these days. It's not currency. It's not cash anymore. It's plastic. Statistics show that people spend something like, 17, 18% more when they spend with plastic. And I know I'm guilty of that. It's just, you swipe it, you put the appetizer on the menu, just, bring me that, bring me this, then you just swipe it. And we're becoming, I hate to say this, it's being done very strategically, but when you look at the evolution of money, to go from hard money like gold and silver that was in coins, then you disconnected that in the States anyway, from cash, because cash used to be gold backed. Now it's not been gold backed since like the 1970s. We put the petrodollar in place. Now that cycle is ending, right? And now you hear all this central bank digital currency stuff coming out, which is still yet another separation from us and the money that we use, because now it's not even in the physical realm anymore. It's not even real. It's actually digital. It's ones and zeros. So, and that's all of this financial stuff the whole design, the whole system, it's all being done that way. But you have to understand that, because your mind and your physical, who you are as people, we're being disconnected from that money, and that can make it almost feel like it's not real. But let me throw this at you, Jesse. This is a learning I've kind of come up with myself. But I'm gonna ask you the question. Let's see what your answer is. What is money?
Well, I guess the textbook answer is a means of exchange, right? And so I'd probably default to that, but I've heard it described in other ways too. I've heard it described as an idea. I've heard it described as pain. I've heard it described as pleasure. I've heard it described as lots of different things. But I guess if I was going to give you, a stock standard answer, I'd say it's a means of exchange.
Okay. Yeah, and that is the most common thing that people say, even when you study some of these great financial minds. I'll tell you what I think it is.
What's that?
At its core, it's time. Because when we work, when I work, you work, anybody works, right? We're converting our time, our effort, our blood, sweat, and tears into currency, which is a medium of exchange. I would also call it a medium of collection. The reason I call it that is because when you look at the systems that we live in, the tax system collects all this money up to a very small group of people. And then the debt system collects all this money up into a very small group of people, which are your global central bankers that own the banks, the central banks in all the world. So when you think about a global organization, you have literally hundreds of central banks that have authority over the financial system and over the debt system in every country, except for about 5 countries in the world. Same people own the same central banks. And then you have stock market, which is more of the same. So all of our blood, sweat, and tears, the common man, that system is designed to collect that, to first convert our time and effort into a currency that is then collectible into this system. So it is a medium of exchange. It's also what I call medium of collection. But bottom line, it's time. And so you and I, everybody listening to your show today, are going to work between 100 and 150,000 hours in their lifetime. Think about that. And think about, yeah, it is. When you think about that, you go, wow, like I'm 25. You mean I'm going to work 150,000 hours? Well, then you got to ask the question, when you're done with all of that work, all of that, what's left? What do you have? What does a vision for your future look like? And, and some people that are listening, I run into some people that go, oh, I'm 50. It's too late. It's too late for me. That's not true. I've met people who turned from millionaires over a period of 5 years and went from nothing, from broke to 5 years in millionaires. Now, here's the thing I tell people. If you are 50 years old, are you more capable than a 20-year-old? You've got 20-something years. You got skills you've developed. You've got assets you have at play. 20-year-olds don't have much of anything other than passion. Yeah, right. And energy. Right. So, sometimes we kind of make excuses on why we're not there or maybe why we messed up. And the reality is wherever you're at, it's possible to do it. That's the choice, but you got to make the choice and you got to back it up with action.
Yeah, it's really interesting on that because I think, you hear the 50-year-old say, I'm too old. You hear the 20-year-old sometimes say, I'm too young. And both of them are wrong. But equally, if they believe it, then both of them are right. And I guess it's about understanding yourself and going, hang on, let me just adopt that right mindset. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about mindset around money because I think having good relationship with money is going to be, really important to create wealth. And part of that, I guess I want to talk about is the concept of identity. You'd be familiar with that, be, do, have model. Who do I need to be so I can do the things I need to do in order to have the things I want to have? And one of the things I wanted to ask you about is at 25, you made a decision to become a millionaire. My contention is, or my hypothesis is, that you were a millionaire internally before you were a millionaire externally, if that makes sense. You had developed a millionaire mindset, you developed millionaire habits, and eventually the $1 million became a reality. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about identity and mindset and how to create those around wealth.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because, in my book, The Millionaire Choice, a lot of financial books, they talk about finances, right?
Yeah.
In my book, it didn't start out with that. It started out, the first key is called develop strong character, because I don't believe you could build or keep wealth unless you have strong character.
Yeah.
My parents were not wealthy, but what I did learn from them was strong character, which I just focused on 5 dimensions of character, which were integrity, responsibility, self-discipline, work ethic, and focus, which are the 5 character traits. They taught me a lot more, but in a book you can only fit so much. But those 5 character traits meant a lot to me because I learned them from my mom and from my dad.
Yeah.
They taught me nothing about money except how to blow it, spend it, and not have it. But they taught me a lot about identity as a person and hard work and ethic. My mom sometimes was working 100 hours a week to put food on the table, and she was robbed by gunpoint like 6 different times on the job where she worked.
Oh, my goodness.
And so she was very committed to our family and very driven. My dad was, worked extremely hard as well. But yeah, your mindset's right. So I had no. I would say that I did not have a millionaire mindset. I had pieces of millionaire traits is a better way to say it. So those character things were big ones. Another one that I'm very big on is about learning, right? So you have to be, if you want to be successful, you have to become a lifelong learner. And that's something I did very well. As a kid, I would be at my mom's convenience stores a lot of time, like get off the school bus, catch the school bus. And so I had to park my butt, at the convenience store for hours a day sometimes. And she had a magazine rack at the store. So I would read everything that was allowable for a young kid to read on the magazine rack.
Yes.
And, that's where I learned how to work on cars. I rebuilt my first car engine when I was about 14, 15 years old. Rebuilt the engine. That's what got me into engineering. But, you could say that led me down a path, but it was that learning principle. I also learned how to bass fish from magazines.
Okay.
And then taught the neighborhood kids how to bass fish, right? They started implementing what I learned through the magazines, and I would teach them. And then they would go fishing and then come back and say, I did what you said, and I caught this fish, and it was this big. And, so that was a big one. So that's why millionaire key number 3 is get money smart. You have to be a lifelong learner. If you want to be good with money, you got to study money. It's a given. You have to do it. And then the third key, which I think is a big millionaire trait, is you got to maximize your time, because we all have the same 24 hours in the day, but it's what we do with that time that determines a large percentage of where we end up, right? So if you look at people that are in poverty, a lot of times they may go work really hard at work, give the 8-hour, 12-hour days, but then when they come home and don't do anything really useful with the rest of the time that they have available. And if they would just take that time and go, you know what, I'm going to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, or I'm going to read The Wealth of Nations, or I'm going to read, another one, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. But these things that reshape your mind, which are what you say, those are the habits and the traits. But then when you start reshaping your mind, you start rebuilding your mind in a different way. And like I said here, our school system, I forget who it was that said this, but I think it was Rockefeller, what a guy, right? He said, I don't need a nation of thinkers. I need a nation of workers. And so they didn't build a school system to create the most intelligent people, thinkers, problem solvers on the planet. They needed worker bees. And so that's the school system that they built. My daughter, she's 15, sent me this thing the other day, and it was very interesting. They showed a phone from 100 years ago, Jesse.
Yeah.
And then you can imagine what that looked like.
Yeah, big and clunky.
And then a phone today. And then it showed a car from 100 years ago. And then a car today. And the evolution that those things have gone through. And then it said, this was a school system 100 years ago, a schoolroom. This is a schoolroom today. And they looked exactly the same. No change in the school system, essentially, for 100 years. And that's what you're dealing with. And, we want to believe that everybody in society has the best intentions in mind. It's just not true. It's just not true. So you have to break through that. And part of that millionaire mindset is not to fall into the system that's been created and is there, but you have to think outside of that system. And I'm not saying the system's totally broken. I benefited from the system in some ways, but I did not follow the system 100%. I deviated from the programming in the system. And I think you probably have done that too to some degree, right, Jesse?
Oh, 100%. And I'm in a very similar situation. I benefited from that schooling system. I was able to navigate through that, okay. But again, I see it for what it is. And I also realize it's not for everyone. And it's really interesting. I've got two daughters, and one of them, they both do well at school, but one of them has become very, very adept at getting other people to help her with a lot of things. And I think that's a life skill right there. She's learned how to enroll others to get her stuff done and to leverage her time and to do other things. I'm thinking, yeah, good. Okay. I'm happy that she's doing well at school, but I'm also happy that she's learning outside of that as well and kind of understanding how to get ahead. You started talking about visions earlier, and you said that your mum and dad, while they didn't teach you much about money, they spoke to you a lot about character traits, your integrity and lifelong learning and so on. My mum and dad didn't teach me much about money either. They did teach me about good values, but the thing that my mother did give me was this ability to dream big dreams. And I think that's probably one of the greatest gifts she's given me. And you said at the beginning that you don't think everyone's like that. And I've only recently discovered that. I don't know why I didn't know that. It's just a gap somewhere in my learning. But I wanted to ask you about the importance of dreams, why not everyone does that dreaming or visioning. Again, how to perhaps start that journey for those that want to. Because I think it's really important.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jesse. And I don't know that I have like a perfect answer, but I'll take a stab at it. Like we said before, Rockefeller mentioned him. He and his cronies, the people that are with him, the power mongers of the planet, if you want to call them that, they want worker bees. And, there's another word I won't use, but you can imagine what it would be. So the system is set up to create that type of people. Though that system doesn't teach you how to dream. It doesn't have, because dreamers will reshape the system. Dreamers, a nation and a globe of dreamers will reshape that system for the betterment of humanity and mankind, which does not benefit the people that are in power. Because when you have a group of people that are financially free and you have a group of dreamers, like a planet full of them, you don't have the problems that we have today, because they are actively solving those problems. The illusion that we have as humanity, both in Australia, the United States, we are fooled into believing that everybody wants the best for mankind, and it's just not true. The best for mankind does not keep the people at the top in power. So that's my outside influencer answer. The system doesn't want dreamers, because dreamers disrupt the power structure. Okay. Now, outside of that, I think you're very right. Like my mom, when I think about her, the environment that we grow up in, your mom, maybe she didn't provide certain things, but she gave you the ability to dream big. You could imagine. For me, my mom, I'm sure you've heard this before, you could be anything you want to be, or, hey, just always do your best. Right? Always do your best. Always do your best. Always do your best. So that's ingrained in me at a very deep level. And my dad was a high school dropout in 10th grade, and it's because he had to go support himself. He didn't get any family support, terrible family life, terrible, like just bad. And my mom, same way. So my parents were able to totally unravel their childhood to give me a really, really good childhood. So they really overcompensated. Their childhoods were so bad that they had to course correct, and they overcorrected in some ways because they sacrificed some of their own well-being for my sister and I. But yeah, so even though we didn't have a lot growing up, but yeah, the vision is a big deal. I think if somebody who doesn't have ability, there's a couple ways you can get started. Okay, one, get away from people who are dragging you down. Like, you need to surround yourself with people that are going where you want to go. So if you want to be broke the rest of your life, hang out with broke people. Mm-hmm. If you want to build wealth, then say goodbye to your broke friends and your broke family members. It's not like you got to be rude and end your relationships, but you have to understand that there are people in your life that you love dearly that are not going where you're going to go. But if you hang on to them, you're never going to get to another place. It's just not going to happen. Now, if you decide, here's the beautiful thing. If you decide to go on that journey and do those difficult things, but still maintain those relationships and love, some of those people will latch on to you and follow your vision. It may take a little while, but I've got a friend right now who I've known since second grade. Like, I went from second grade through high school, several of my friends. Now, since I've written my book and my book's come out, two of them are now on that journey behind me to become millionaires.
That's awesome.
And I'm 52 years old. They're 52 years old. So they are thinking differently about money now than they ever have in their lives. And it's a really fun thing to watch. But if I had not been brave enough to leave some relationships behind, to step forward, then that would never happen, because you really can't control the other people. You can only control yourself and your own environment. But yeah, so get around good people, get into some groups. I call them find a money mentor. So somebody that's going to reinforce your thinking, people that you hang out with, people that you fellowship with. If you're going to the pub with your drinking buddies and they're all broke, they're probably going to be broke for most of their lives. You're just that's the life you're going to live, right? I've got several people I know that's the life they're living, and they're stuck, and you got to get unstuck. So you have to create some kind of catalyst. I think you can leverage, if you can't do it, you can leverage somebody else's vision. And like I said before, Dave Ramsey is probably the biggest financial guy on the planet, and he's transformed tens of millions, if not, 50 million people's lives, and they're borrowing his vision. They don't have the ability to create their own vision, so they're going, Dave said I can be debt free, I'm going to be debt free, and they borrow that. I'm saying, hey, I think you can be a millionaire. Borrow my vision, borrow it for a while until you can create your own. And my vision's evolved over time. And so I think you don't have to have a perfect vision, Jesse. You just got to have a vision that gets you motivated and gets you moving in a good direction. So don't try to make it perfect. Don't try to, you don't have to fully understand it, because you're going to do a lot of learning on the path and on the journey. And you just got to get moving in the right direction. That's the biggest thing, I think.
Yeah, lovely. So, again, at the risk of bouncing around, you spoke about some principles and some steps there, and you spoke about one or two of the wealth principles. I'm wondering if we can just go through a few of those steps so the listeners can get a bit of an understanding, like, okay, I've got a vision. I've made this decision. Now what? What do I do? What are we mentioned that there's a decision, there's some actions. What are those actions? What are those steps to be thinking about and putting in place as they go about transforming their lives from a financial perspective?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a couple things that I actually haven't written on yet. I'm going to give you what's in my book, but I'm also going to give you some other stuff that I'm kind of learning, because the book's 5 years old now, right? Yeah, so the first thing I would do, we talked about vision. You got to have vision. You got to shift your mindset, right? So you got to change your mindset. If you're thinking small, you got to think big. You got to think can do. You got to believe in it. You got to believe in what you're doing. So those are kind of what I call mindset. Call them your financial awakening, right? I don't want to live this way anymore. I'm ready to live a different way, right? So stop spending all your money. That's your shift. That's your consciousness shift that happens. After your consciousness shifts, and you shift into this, I'm going to do this, I can do it. Then you have to build what I call your foundation. And your foundation really is a couple things. It's your character. You have to do that. If you're a dishonest person, it's going to follow you. Karma is going to follow you. It's not going to go well for you. If you're stealing from people, if you're greedy, you don't want to be greedy. Money can hurt you. If you've got character flaws, when you have more money, it just accentuates your character flaws. So more money is just gonna, if you're a bad person, it's just gonna empower you to do more bad stuff. So you don't want that. If you got alcoholism issues, more money could actually hurt you because you're gonna have more access to that. If you got like sexual addictions, same thing. So you got to get your foundation right. So it's character. That's how you're using your time. That's you got to get money smart. So you got to start learning about money. You have to learn some principles. So you got to take some time to do that. Get into a habit of learning. Then you find your money mentor. That's your group you're hanging out with. Okay. That's what I call like your foundation. Then after you get your foundation shored up, then you start moving in, and this can happen pretty quickly. I don't want to make this sound like it takes 2 years to do that. Like that stuff can happen really, really fast. Then you get into your basic financial principles, which is like, hey, let's get you on a budget. I call that a spending plan because it's a lot more fun spending money than it is to budget money.
Yeah.
So you want to spend it in the right place, right? Budgeting scares people, scares my wife, scares me. It's very constrictive. Spending, hey, I spend it here, I put it here, I put it in the other places, put it in the right places. So that's your spending plan. Then you need, you've got to get into watching your expenses. A lot of people make more money. They abuse their expenses, right? So if your money goes up, don't increase your expenses. Take your money and put it into something that's going to build value for you. So you don't want to do that. So you got your expenses. You've got your debt, right? What are you going to do with debt? So I prefer to not use debt to build wealth. I've stayed away from debt. Like I haven't had a credit card now for 20 years. It's been 21 years actually. No credit cards. I've been house debt free up until recently. I took out some house debt, but I've been house debt free since 2012. We're doing some rehabs. I've never done like property flips before, but we needed some cash flow to do some property flips and stuff. So I've picked up a little bit of debt there. Up until there, though, we've been debt free for about a decade, about 10 years, and just went back into it. So those are your big things. So if you avoid debt or you destroy debt, I call it do a debt demolition. So destroy your debt before your debt destroys you, right? So that's what you want to do. Get rid of that. So get control of it. And then you get into like investment principles, and there's so many different ways to build wealth. It's unbelievable. Like, there's like a dozen different ways just to go invest in real estate. Like some people think you got to have a lot of money to go buy a piece of real estate. You really don't. There's a lot of ways to get into real estate with very little money to kind of get started and get going. And but you can do that. You can do stocks. You can do venture capital stuff. But you have to develop this mindset of going, I'm going to start getting a return on my money, right? I'm going to put my money to work for me versus working for my money. That's kind of a saying that's up here in the States is if you don't put your money to work for you, then you will always work for your money, right? And you want to get to a place where your money's making stuff for you and it's happening for you. And honestly, Jesse, I knew that principle. I didn't do the best job of applying that principle. I was so anti-debt that I really went after my debt hardcore, when if I could go back, rewind the clock a little bit, I would have been setting up different investment types. Instead of being so aggressive on my debt payoff, I would have probably strung my debt payoff a little bit out and then done some more asset access, because I didn't understand the principles of inflation. Yeah. And those things. So that's kind of, I'm getting a little bit into advanced, but that's your basic finances. And then you get into your advanced finances, which I delved into that a little bit, right? So I would call that advanced finances is all the complex things you can do with tax structures, estates, trusts, different types of investments. You got, I don't know, what are your investment plans, retirement plans down there? We have the 401k and the IRAs up here.
Yeah, we have a program called superannuation, and so employers have to give their employees, as of July 1 this year, it's going to be 11%. And so it's
wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. And but as business owners, obviously we need to fund that ourselves. And you can put in about $27,500 a year per person into superannuation in a tax-effective manner. After that, you can do others, but it's not as effective from a tax point of view. Yeah.
But yeah, understanding that I think is key, and then just keep learning, estates, trust, all the advanced stuff. But yeah, so Blake, let me review that, Jesse. So we've got the mindset, the awakening that has to happen. That's the shift, the mindset, the consciousness of what's going on. Then you get into the foundation, which is, those 4 basic things that I mentioned. They go back and listen to that. Then you get into basic financial principles, and you gotta do really well with those. Okay. Most people, at least the parents say, don't even master the basic financial principles, and they skip the mindset. So they don't do the mindset, they don't do the principles, and that's why you're on like this gerbil wheel, like your whole life. It's like I said before, 100 to 150,000 hours. That's what you're going to work in your lifetime. So what are you going to have after that? You know, if you just save $1 an hour, right? It's 150 grand, like $1 an hour. If you save it, and that's if you don't make any like investments off of it. So, you know, it's everybody in my mind, Jesse, this is something I'm trying to teach up here. I think there should only be two types of people in the world. That's millionaires and future millionaires.
Yeah.
So they should either already be wealthy or it should be already on a path to becoming wealthy. And that should start, if humanity's doing its job well, that should start the day a child is born. That journey, that principle should start. We should put that into action the day the kid is born, because then you don't have to wait. Like most people don't start till they're in their 20s or 30s. But what if we as the adults, the humans, the ones responsible for society, just said, hey, we're going to change the way the system works. The system is not, you can't say it's terrible because some people benefit from it. But if we really came together and wanted it to be like holistic and beneficial, like, I mean, it's ridiculous, right? There's almost 1 billion people go hungry on the planet every single day.
Yeah, it's insane. It's
insane. Here's the reason. This is the reason. This is why I've developed the Purpose of Wealth events, which, you know, we may talk about. Because if the good people don't have the money, Jesse, the bad people do. So if you think the world is jacked up, why is there 48 million human trafficked slaves on the planet? Why are there 4.8 sex trafficked slaves on the planet? Why is the average age of a sex trafficked female victim, the average age is 14 years old?
Oh my God.
And once they're in it, they only live about 7 years. So once they get introduced into human trafficking as sex slaves, they live about 7 years. That's their lifespan. Why does that problem exist in modern day society on this planet? And it's very simple, and it's hard to digest. The people that have the power, the people that have the money, don't want to solve those problems. They have the money, they have the power to do it. They don't want those problems solved. So that's the current system. So in my world, we need to change the system. We need to put the money in the people's hands who really care about each other and care about society. And that's how we fix things, because we got to reshape the system to some degree. But anyway, I'm on a soapbox there.
No, that's okay. Well, let's talk about the purpose of money, because I think that's a really interesting thought, because it's one thing to be able to say, hey, I can now cater for my own needs. I can cater for the needs of my family. But, you know, I'm a bit of a believer that, you know, the purpose of creating wealth is the ripple effect to have an impact on your community. And that community could be your local community, could be the broader international community, whatever that may mean. So I wanted to ask your thoughts about where that fits in, the purpose of wealth, philanthropy, solving problems. How does that show up in your space? And again, what I'm trying to bring out of this conversation is using money as a force for good. I know a lot of people have some negative views about money and so on, but I think money is a really useful tool. And I think it's a tool that can be used for great purposes. If we can accumulate enough and deploy it wisely, then that's great. So what do you think about when you're talking about the purpose of money?
Well, I'll start with where I grew up, because it has been a consciousness shift for me. You know, I've never chased raises. I've never chased money. I've never sought after it. I just kind of oh, this is the system. This is how you do it. This is how it works. It's never been like a greed thing for me. So I've never asked for a single raise in my entire life. Money's just kind of always flowed to me. So I'm a churchgoer here in the States. So we're taught a principle called tithing, which you give 10% to your church. And that's what I did. That was I was expected to do. And that's what I did. And here's what I saw happen to me in that time frame. And I can recommend a book to people who want to investigate this more. As I had more money, I personally experienced God coming and asking me to give it away.
Wow.
And there were times where I would hear someone speak at my church, and my wife and I have a system. And we had a minister from Lima, Peru come in one time here in Nashville. And I'm sitting there listening to this guy. I'm like, I'm supposed to give this guy some money. And I text my wife and I say, hey, I think I'm supposed to give this guy some money. And I'm like, she's like, how much do you think you're supposed to give him? And I'm like, oh, $10,000. I think I'm supposed to give him $10,000. And I went down to this guy after he spoke, and I waited for him because all these people wanted to talk to him, And I went down and talked to him afterwards, and I said, hey, the Lord told me to give you this $10,000 check. And he starts crying, and he says, I've not told anybody this, but we bought land to build a new building in Lima, Peru, and we were facing so much opposition by the government that I just doubted on whether or not I should be doing this or not. And I prayed I needed something like some kind of affirmation to go back and go through this fight, back in Lima, Peru. And I'm like, well, here's this somewhat sizable check. Now, what was interesting is, there have been several times like that in my life. As my income went up, as I had more, the checks got bigger. So that's been my experience, is that I've been tested with wealth for the betterment of mankind and for the betterment of people. Now, here's where that shifted for me a little bit. I was taught the tithing principle, and that's what I grew up with. Since I've become a financial teacher myself, I've got an event called The Purpose of Wealth, which says enjoy life, help others, and serve God. It's a threefold purpose of wealth. So, yeah, you're supposed to enjoy your money. Do it. But don't neglect people that need it. There's 147 million plus orphans, single parent orphans on the planet that need help. I talked to a lady last night for 6 hours. I was on the phone with a lady, Tammy Devine. She was an African woman, born on a mud floor in an African hut. And I forget the country that she lived in, but she was born there. She had 4 siblings. They all passed away. Like, she's the only surviving child of that family. And her mom passed away when she was 6 years old, and her dad abandoned them even before that.
Wow.
So that's the hardship that this wonderful woman grew up in. Now, she's amazing to go through that, to go, wow, she came from that and to who she is today. That's amazing. But we need that. We need that money to help people who have those needs, because everybody is a wonderful, precious life, and we've all been dealt different, cards to work with. But the purpose is something that's developed for me beyond like tithing, beyond just giving. Like, that's how I used to think. Now, what it's done for me when I've embraced a purpose behind my money, it's why do you work? Why do you really go to work? Ask yourself that question. Why do you make money? Like, why do you make money? And then when you can attach a purpose to both your work and your money, then something wonderful's happened to me, which is I go, you know what? I have a responsibility to go make as much wealth as I possibly can, because that money is a tool that I can use to go help people whether they be in Africa or across the street in my own city, right? There are people in need right around the corner from where you live. Like, everybody listening to this podcast. So for now, that's a shift for me. Now, I will say this. I've interviewed about 120 people on my own personal podcast. I've probably talked to less than 5% of those, or 10% of those, that actually put purpose behind their money. Like, they do good things, but they haven't yet made the consciousness shift to a purpose behind the money that they're making. And that's something that I think is very powerful once you start making that shift. It's not just, hey, I've got money, let me go help somebody. But like, I have a consciousness now in my own mind to make as much money as I can, because I know that that's going to allow me to help one more orphan, or save one more girl out of human trafficking, or whatever those needs are. There's no shortage of needs, right? We just said over 1 billion people a day go hungry. That's, 15, I don't know, it's 10, 15% of the world's population is going hungry every day. That problem should not exist.
No, it really shouldn't. And nor should the other ones, for that matter. Hey, Tony, I think this is a really fascinating topic, and I guess what I'd like to just wrap up our conversation with today, I'd like to ask you, just to kind of think about a few key things that you'd like to leave the audience with, because the purpose of money, I think, is a really powerful point. If you attach purpose to your work and your money, not just one or the other, then I think that's going to be a really big force multiplier. And what other things do you think that our audience should be, not necessarily should, but I like using the word should, what other things could the audience be thinking about as they go on their own journey to start thinking about creating their wealth, their choices in their life, and their plan? What other things do you think they could be thinking about?
I'll give you what I think is the most important thing right now that's so easy to apply. And that is, your habits, because people have to understand that wealth creation, it's just a process. It's just a process and a system. And once you understand the process and the system and you apply it and you form the right habits around it, the wealth is going to materialize, and it's going to be more than you could ever imagine. You know, if you want to put purpose behind it, you go, you know what, I want my net worth to be 10 million or 20 million or 30 million or whatever that number is. There's a process that will lead you there. There are habits that will lead you there. You just have to sit down. And so I'll recommend this exercise. I've done this several times. You create 2 columns. One is a bad habits column, and one is a good habits column. And then you just need to list out all your habits that you have today in each column, maybe how much time they take per day, just so you get time management worked in there. And then you need to go, okay, my bad habits, which ones can I eliminate? And then now can I create some new good habits, right? So we talked about getting money smart. I believe everybody should be reading financial books. I've got 12 financial books listed on my website. If you read 12 personal finance books over the next year, one a month for 12 months, you'll be one of the most educated financial people on the planet. Just from that, right? And the first one I would start with is Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That is the number one book of everybody I've had on my podcast when they said, I read that book and my whole thinking changed and I was a millionaire like 10 years later.
That book changed my life. That book changed my life.
Yeah. So that's a big one. I don't agree with everything Robert Kiyosaki teaches, but he's going to get you moving in the right direction, which is, like we said, the key before. So I would sit down today, like immediately after somebody hears the podcast, do a habits worksheet. Where's my bad habits? What are my good habits? Let me create these habits that Tony and Jesse have been talking about. And, you know, some of that includes finding a money mentor. Some of it includes getting money smart, restructuring your budget, those kinds of things. And once you do that, wealth is going to materialize because those things have to be in place. If you don't, and you just have a long list of bad habits and that's how your life, that's why you're going to end up poor. That's why you're not, even if you're making a good check. That's right, Jesse, right? Because you talk about, you know, dentists make really good money, but there's a difference between being wealthy and making a good paycheck.
Yeah. Huge.
Yeah. And you can lose it, right? You can lose every dime. I'll use this one story real quick and then I'll shut up. We bought a house 2 years ago. Wonderful house, 4,700 square feet, got 6 external doors on the first level, 2 doors, got an indoor swimming pool, got a sauna in the house. It's a resort home, 1,500 square foot deck. It's a beautiful property on 10 acres of land. All right. The guy that owned that had been a surgeon making really good money, doctoral surgeon. He was had a party. At the party, the deck collapsed. And when the deck collapsed, he broke his back and never worked again. Never worked again. So he went from being a surgeon with a high salary income to not making anything, and then ended up having to sell his house. And it was run down pretty bad. Like I probably pumped in $300,000 into this house to get it back up to speed where it needs to be. But you can't take for granted where you are today. So you really need to go, okay, I need to prepare for tomorrow, not out of fear, but out of intelligence, out of stewardship, out of just good. That's a good habit to go, hey, I'm going to prepare for the future. And as you do that and you attach purpose to your money, then if you have more money than you need, then it just allows you to do more of those 3 things like we talked about earlier.
Mate, that's fantastic. I really, really resonated with the habits exercise as well. I think that's a wonderful exercise. I think, you know, ladies and gents, I'd really encourage you to do that list that Tony suggested. I'd also really encourage you to head across to Tony's website, tonybradshaw.com, and check it out because there is a treasure trove of goodies there. There's a whole bunch of resources. I've been, scooting around, watching videos, looking at the book. Which is great. So just avail yourself of those resources. We'll put the links in the show notes so you can find that easily and streamline that process for you. But I'd really encourage you to start that journey now. And I think as Tony has quite rightly pointed out, there's a process to follow. It's not rocket science, but it does require some good character traits, including self-discipline and consistency and all those other things that, make it all work. Tony, I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to you, mate, for joining us. I know it's evening for you in Nashville, and I'm not quite sure what time of evening it is, but I think it's getting late. So thank you for sitting up and talking to us. And it's a really important topic, fascinating topic, and I could have talked to you for like days. just days, mate. You're wonderful, and I appreciate all the good work that you do.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Jesse, too. And I need to fly down to Australia, maybe get you to clean my teeth or something.
All right. It's been a while since I've picked up a scaler, mate, so I might have to refer you on to someone a little more current than me, mate, but we'll get it sorted out. All right, mate. Listen, lovely to talk to you, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. For more episodes, go to drjessiegreen.com/savvydentist. And to discover how to build a high-performance dental practice, visit drjessiegreen.com and download the free report.